Hi everyone, I'm Eunice. Welcome and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So it's the month of July. I wanted to share with you some of the books that I was able to read so far in the year from January until June. So let's do it. I'll first start with the physical books that I read, and then I'm going to talk about the audiobooks that I was able to listen to. Let's do it. The first book that I read was The Black Panther Party, a graphic novel by David F. Walker. This was an interesting read because it was able to get me out of my reading slump at the beginning of the year. So basically, it follows the story of the Black Panther Party, the beginning, their journey throughout the resistance, what they've been through, what they had to encounter, what they have to conquer. It was really an interesting read. For those who don't know, the Black Panther Party was a Black political organization founded in 1966 in Oakland, California by Bobby Steele and Hugh P. Newton. It was an interesting read and easy to read. I highly recommend it. The second book that I read was Black History in Its Own Words by Ronal Wimberly. This was an illustration books with different Black American celebrities with the summary of who they are and what they do. It was an interesting and quick read and it's fun. And the next book that I read was Black Lotus by Sheila Abrams. This was a memoir. Prior to this book, I didn't know anything about Sheila, so this book was a good way for me to get to know her and to get to know her story. So in summary, Sheila Abrams was born from a Chinese mother and a Black father that she never knew because she was raised by her mother's husband, who was a Caucasian man. And growing up, she started noticing that her skin color was different from her siblings' skin color. And whenever she was asking, they were telling her, your skin is different because you were born in Hawaii. So she held on to that truth, growing up thinking that she was born in Hawaii, that she was not Black. And then until she learned the real truth that she was Black because her dad was Black. And she was discombobulated by this truth. And she went on a quest of searching for her identity, searching who she was exactly, because it was a truth that didn't really come easy to her, because her whole life she thought she was not Black, and now she had to face the possibility that, okay, you are a Black. It was an interesting read. It was really interesting knowing about her story, her journey, and what she went through. I highly recommend. It's an interesting book. The last book that I read was Amanda Gorman, Inspiring Hope with Poetry by Dr. Artika R. Tyler. So this was a short book with pictures of Amanda Gorman talking about her story, her journey, who she was, what she's been doing up until now. It was an interesting read and I really enjoyed it. For those who don't know, Amanda Gorman is a Black American activist and poet. I highly recommend checking out her work as well. And the next book that I read was The Completed Poem of Maya Angelou. For those who don't know, I write poetry as well. You can check out my Instagram and TikTok where I post about my poetry as well. So I heard about Maya Angelou's work. I heard about her poetry, but I never had a chance to read it. And I didn't rush myself either because I knew my time would come with her work. And that time finally came. And I'm also glad because I didn't rush it, because now I'm mature enough to understand her work and appreciate it. And I really enjoyed this book so much. You can check out my Instagram where I mentioned some of my favorite poems by her. It was an amazing experience. I really enjoyed reading her poem. I got inspired myself to write even more. So it was really interesting. I highly recommend it. The next book that I read was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was my first book by Elizabeth Acevedo. Let me tell you, I thought with times I'll be able to find the right word to explain how I feel about this book, but until now I haven't found the right word. I just love this book so much. I really love it. I really enjoy every piece of it. So for the summary, the books talk about a young lady called Xiomara who was passionate about writing. She was using poetry as a way to understand her world, as a way to navigate her challenge of being a teenager, as a way just to understand the world around her. and it was really interesting read, and every piece of it is just, oh, I really love this book so much, and it was really interesting. I highly recommend. It was my first book by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I can't wait to read more books by her, so I highly recommend this one. And the next book that I read was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This was one of my favorite books so far in the year. I really enjoyed this book so much, and it was my first time reading Tia Williams. Amazing story. So in summary, this book talks about Eva and Shane, who were high school sweethearts. They spent a complicated and tricky week together, but then they drifted apart for 15 years, I think. It was for 15 years. Eva became an author, Shane became an author as well. But what they did was, they couldn't stop writing about each other's, meaning in Eva's book, the main character was inspired by Shane. So the male character was inspired by Shane. And in Shane's book, the female main character was inspired by Eva's. Just amazing. And then they had to meet 15 years later, forced to tackle the unfinished business. And to tell you how much I love this book, my favorite line from the book was actually when Eva and Shane met at the event, and then Eva told Shane, "Stop writing about me," and then Shane responded, "You first." When I tell you I felt that line in my soul, I just love this book so much. I really enjoy every detail, the writing style. It was just an amazing book, and I highly recommend it. And I hope to read more books by Tia Williams. I love her as an author. The next book that I read was Soul of the Deep by Natasha Bowen. Soul of the Deep was actually a sequel to Skin of the Sea. This is the first book, and then Soul of the Deep was the second book. So basically, the two books talks about Simidele. In the first book, she made a deal that she thought was for the greater good in order to protect the people she loves and care about. And then in the second book, the sequel, she realized that her deal actually had caused more damage than good, and then she had to break free from that seal in order to save the people she loves as well. It was an interesting read, and what I love, it's a fantasy book as well. And what I love about this book, it's really showcasing African mythology in all its glory, and also not just African mythology by Nigeria, but every pieces of other African country mythology was also featured in the book. They even feature a piece of the Congolese mythology. I was on cloud 9. It was really interesting, and I love the story. So I always say Natasha Bowen can do no wrong to me, and I can't wait to read more of her books. So I highly recommend Skin of the Sea and then Soul of the Deep. The next book that I read was The Red Balcony by Jonathan Wilson. My favorite book. I really enjoyed this book, and it was my first time reading anything by Jonathan Wilson. So this story follows, first, the story is based on the real life events surrounding the death of Herm Aluzorov in 1933. Yes, in 1933. So for those who don't know, Herm Aluzorov was a Jewish leader in Palestine. But at the coming time, Herm Aluzorov was involved in the agreement that required the Jews to flee Germany and to flee Hitler at the time. But the Jews didn't understand what he was trying to accomplish, because they were just seeing it as he was siding with the enemy, which led to his death. And then in this story comes Ivo Castle, who was a Jewish young lawyer from Oxford, who was part of the lawyer defending the two people accused of Aluzorov's murder. And during the preparation of the trial, he met a young lady called Siona, who was a key witness to the case. And then they fell in love. They embarked on a love relationship that was risky, complicated, and even had a sense of forbiddenness to it. It was an interesting story. It was a heavily political and legal drama with a sprinkle of romance that really gave it a perfect blend of bitter and sweet. I really enjoyed this story. This was my favorite read, hands down. I highly recommend this book, and I can't wait to read more books by Jonathan Wilson. I highly recommend this book. Interesting. The next book that I read was The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. This book is a classic. It's a classic book written in 1989. So in summary, The Joy Luck Club follows the story of 4 Chinese women who immigrated to San Francisco, and they form what they call the Joy Luck Club. So the Joy Luck Club was for them an outlet to find solace in each other, to navigate the challenge of being away from their home country, and also navigate the challenge of raising their American-born daughters. It was an amazing read. It was really an interesting read. It really pushes you to reflect on certain aspects of life, and also reflect on motherhood. Even myself, I really reflect on motherhood, how it's not an easy job, and mothers are just human beings trying their best with what they know and what they have. It was an amazing read. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend this book. The next book that I read was Vulnerable AF by Tarriona Tank Ball. This was a poetry book talking about the author's past love relationship. It was amazing, beautifully written. I could resonate and connect with this book so much. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and just beautifully written. I really enjoyed this so much. So if you love poetry books, I highly recommend this one. It was amazing. The next book that I read was The Dating Playbook by Farrah Rochon. This was my first book by Farrah Rochon. I've never read anything by her. So basically, this is the story of Jamar and Taylor. Jamar was a former football player who got injured and stopped playing. And then after a while, he wanted to go back to the NFL and play again, but he needed somebody to train him. So he contacted Taylor, who was a fitness trainer, to train with him. But the condition was that Taylor should not tell people that she was training Jamar. It has to be kept as a secret. So at some point, they met a journalist, and then in the quest of trying to hide the truth, Taylor said that she was Jamar's girlfriend. And now they had to live as girlfriend and boyfriend in order to hide the truth. They had to live as a couple, posting pictures online, just making people believe that they were a couple in order to keep the secret that actually Taylor was training Jamar. Overall, I'm not complaining. It was an interesting read, although I didn't feel like there was a strong chemistry between the main characters, between Taylor and Jamar. But it was an interesting read. I'm not complaining. Overall, it was a good read. The first book that I was able to listen was Where We End and Begin by Jane Igharo. Jane Igharo is a Nigerian author. So the first one, Where We End and Begin, the story follows Duni and Obina. They were high school sweethearts. Duni was coming from a rich family, and Obina was coming from a less fortunate family. And Duni's mother was adamant about her daughter not marrying a poor man, which was a whole saga, a whole drama. But they drifted apart because Duni has to go to the United States to study, and then Obina stayed in Lagos. And then years after, 12 years later, Duni came back to Lagos for her best friend's wedding, and then she met Obina. Now they were forced to tackle their unfinished business and perhaps find a closure. It was really interesting story. I enjoyed the whole drama, the saga. It was an interesting read. It keeps you on the toe. You want to know what's gonna happen next. It was interesting. I enjoyed the first part when they were in Lagos. But when Duni went back to Seattle with the plot twist, I was really taken aback. By then I was ready for the book to be over. But overall, it was an interesting read. I enjoyed the story. The second book that I listened to was The Ties That Theater by Igharo as well. This one follows the story of Azere, who promised her father in his deathbed that she was going to marry a Nigerian man, and a man from the Edo state specifically. But she didn't have much chance with Edo men, and she ended up being pregnant by a Spanish man called Rafael. It was an interesting story. It was also a whole saga, a whole drama about culture, about the fear of losing your culture. It was amazing. It was really an amazing read, and it was also my first time reading a pregnancy trope. I'm not complaining. It was not bad. It was an interesting read. So yeah. And the next book that I listened to was Girl Stop Apologizing by Rachel Hollis, and also Didn't See That Coming by Rachel Hollis as well. For those who don't know, Rachel Hollis is an American blogger, motivational speaker, and she's also an author. The first time I heard about her was in a podcast that I was listening to a couple years ago, and they talk about her and her book, Girl Stop Apologizing, and I decided to give it a try and read it. So the first one, Girl Stop Apologizing, is a self-help book giving you advice on how to embrace your goal, embrace your achievements, set the goals for yourself, your own success, pretty much. And the second book, Didn't See That Coming, is also a self-help book giving you practical advice on how to overcome unexpected events in life. So it was interesting. I'm not complaining. Interesting read. Also interesting way to get to know who she is, what she does, and it was a good read. I enjoyed listening to those two books. And the next book that I listened to was Bits and Pieces, My Mother, My Brother, and Me by Whoopi Goldberg. Fun fact, Whoopi Goldberg is my favorite actress. I grew up watching Whoopi Goldberg's movies. My dad is a fan of Whoopi Goldberg. Actually, my dad is the one who actually told me that her name was Whoopi Goldberg. I knew her sister Marie Clarence from Sister Act. But one day my dad said her name is Whoopi Goldberg. And since then, I never let her go. She's my favorite actress. So this book basically talks about her mother, her brother, how they were really detrimental to her success, what they've been through as a family, their high and lows. It was an amazing book, and it was narrated by herself. It was fun, and I was not bored. I was not bored listening to this book. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. And the last book that I listened to was Thicker Than Water by Kerry Washington. I haven't watched much of Kerry Washington's movie, but I know her as an actress, and I didn't even watch Scandal. But I love memoirs, biographies, celebrity memoirs, also biographies. It was also interesting to me, so I decided to read it because I was just curious to know about her journey, and it was interesting. It was also a good way to get to know her, what she's been through, what she represents, and just have a glimpse into her journey as an actress. It was amazing. I really enjoyed reading it too. I was not bored. So yeah. So that's pretty much all the books that I was able to read so far in the year. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me comments about any books that you've been able to read so far in the year. If you are planning on reading any book that I mentioned, or even if you read one of the books that I mentioned here, let me know in the comment section and let's chat about it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.